The amount of times that I have tried to record this video. After talking to some of my friends and some of my classmates who are still planning to take the NCLEX, I found that some of the most important information that I could share was just my own personal experience, the things that I learned, and then kind of just what I went through to prepare and also for exam day. I did an accelerated BSN program that was 15 months long, and I graduated August 13th of 2022. Because it was such a fast program, although I learned so much, I still felt like it was a really short time and I wasn't really able to retain a lot of the information long term. And so going into my dedicated study time for the NCLEX, I felt like I was building upon a really meager foundation. Yeah. So to go over a really basic timeline, I graduated August 13th and I got my authorization to test on August 19th. On August 19th, I scheduled my NCLEX exam date to be September 15th, and my first day of really dedicated study time was August 20th. Eventually, I ended up moving up my test date from September 15th to September 12th. And so from the very first day that I started studying, August 20th, to September 12th, was 24 days total, which I feel like was the perfect amount of time to balance both having enough prep time and also not being super burnt out by test day. On September 14th, 2 days after my exam, I found out that I passed the NCLEX and I got my license to practice in the state of California. So how many questions did it take for me to pass the NCLEX? It took me 115 questions. I am not one of those people who can super proudly say that it took me 75 questions. No, I had the added joy and challenge of freaking out for an additional 40 questions after question 75. So I will happily talk about that experience a little bit later as well. If you're watching this and you are still in nursing school, you don't need to start prepping for the NCLEX while you're still in school. Obviously, while you're in school, you should build your foundation as much as possible and just spend your time learning as much as you can. But then it's after graduation that you should give yourself 2 to 4 weeks of really dedicated NCLEX study time. Yeah, I think that's all you really need and you're good to go. So the 2 main resources I used were Mark Klimek and UWorld. For Mark Klimek, it's basically his lectures that you listen to. I only went through his lectures once, and I had originally intended to go through them twice. The first time I was intending to just let myself listen to the lectures and kind of, I don't know, try to absorb them through osmosis or something. And the second time around, I was actually gonna take notes on all of the memorization tips and all the things that he taught. And so that ended up not working out that great for me because I actually ended up getting too burnt out to listen to his lectures again a second time. So for what I would recommend to others that I did not do is the first time you listen to his lectures, take notes on the memorization technique. You can also find study guides on his lecture notes if you Google them and whatnot, and I found those to be the most helpful. He also has a yellow book. He also has a yellow book and a blue book, but I found that notes on his actual lectures or study guides on his actual lectures were the most helpful. Aside from that, just try to make yourself a cheat sheet per lecture and write down all of the memorization techniques, because I absolutely did not do that. And I think because of that, I kind of blanked out during the NCLEX and forgot a lot of them. So yeah, I think it would be super helpful to do that. Also, this is kind of a weird thing to say, but of his lectures, so there's 12 lectures. So lecture 12 is the season finale of all of his lectures, and if there's any lecture that you should really listen to, it's that one. He himself claims that it is his most important lecture because it talks about prioritization, which is a huge part of the NCLEX and is kind of just something that you need to know as a nurse. And then at the end of the lecture, he also does rapid fire test taking tips, which are super helpful as well. So don't miss out on lecture 12. So the second resource that I used, which I think if there is any one resource that you should use to study for the NCLEX, if you only have to choose one, UWorld should be your #1 resource. so the UWorld bundle that I got was the 90-day access, which gives you 2,000 plus test bank questions, and it gives you 2 assessments. Although I did all my studying in 24 days, I still think that it was really helpful to have 2 assessments to kind of gauge how you're doing, and so that you can take an assessment kind of halfway through your study time and then a couple days before your exam to really give you the confidence that you need to feel like you're ready to take your exam. 90-day access, it is $219 right now. I don't know if that's going to change over time, but I think that the investment is definitely worth it. I'm just going to show you a screenshot of my study plan. Basically, from the moment that I scheduled my NCLEX exam, I took out a piece of paper and I wrote down every single date from that first day that I started studying to my NCLEX exam. And then I put a column with a questions section where I would just tally off how many questions that I would do for UWorld, each tally being 10 questions. And yeah, that kind of just helped me to stay accountable with studying, and it also just helped me to keep track of how many questions I was doing, because otherwise I really wouldn't have known. Another thing is I never really pressured myself to do a certain amount of questions every day, because I found that giving myself that leeway made it more sustainable to study in the long term. Like some of the days I would only do 30 questions or 40 questions in that day, and then I think my highest I ever did in a day was like 290 or something. I think by not pressuring myself to stick to a certain amount of questions per day, I was able to do however many I needed to do based on my energy levels, and that was just super sustainable for me. I also started doing UWorld questions from day 1 of my study time. Even though I was watching my Mark Klimek lectures for that first week of studying, I was still doing UWorld questions at the same time. And I feel like you don't have to prepare yourself or try to build your foundation before doing UWorld questions as much as you want to have higher scores on those quizzes. Reading the rationales from UWorld is what will help you build your foundational knowledge. And so getting started on the questions as soon as possible, reading those rationales, whether you get the questions right or wrong, is what studying is, and is what will help you do better on the NCLEX. That being said, reading rationale is, I think, the most important thing you can do with UWorld. And I honestly think that if you did half of the question bank for UWorld and read all of the rationales thoroughly, that would be much more beneficial than doing all of the UWorld questions and not reading the rationales. Like, I don't know how else to say it, but read the rationales. Read the rationales. And the way that I structured my quizzes was that I always did them randomized because I wanted to mimic the exam as much as possible. For me personally, I didn't really deep dive into any particular subjects, even if I knew I was slightly weaker in some subjects more than others. I just figured that the questions on the NCLEX could honestly be so random, and for the chances of me getting questions in a very specific topic, in a very specific subject, were pretty low, and so I didn't want to deep dive into any particular subject or topic. I was just randomizing everything and reading as much of the rationales as I could. And in the beginning, I was doing 10 question quizzes, but then as I moved on, I was doing 20 question quizzes, and then kind of from the halfway point and on, I was doing 50 question quizzes only. That was kind of just to build my testing stamina, and I think it honestly really helps a lot. And when I was taking those 50 question quizzes, I was forcing myself to really sit down and just focus on doing all 50 questions at the same time, reading the rationale, and just really mimicking test day as much as possible. You don't really realize how much of a big deal test stamina is until test day, but you do need to build your test stamina. Like, it'll help a lot.
Something else that I forgot to mention was that in the beginning, I was doing most of my UWorld studying on my phone app because it was just the most convenient. But then closer to the test day, I was exclusively using UWorld on my computer browser, just because obviously you're going to be taking the test on the computer, and I wanted to mimic taking the exam as closely as possible. So yeah.
Prior to taking the NCLEX, for my question bank, my percentage correct was 60% correct. On the UWorld website, it says that if your percentage correct of your question bank questions is above 56%, you have a 92% chance of passing the NCLEX. So on your quizzes, if you're ranging in the mid 50% and above, as much as 60% feels really bad, you're actually in a good spot, and yeah, you're in a good place. For my first assessment, which I took halfway through my study period, I got 63% correct. And then for my second assessment, 4 days before my exam, I got 64% correct. But they were both in the very high chance of passing category. So they were good. Okay, so my exam was actually 1 in the afternoon. I would have preferred it to be in the morning because I'm a morning person, but that was just the only time that I had for that date, and I moved my date up. But the morning before my exam, I decided to go climbing. I ended up having a late breakfast because of that, which I regret, because as much as I had a full meal for breakfast, it was not enough to both make up for the calories that I had spent climbing and also provide the calories that my brain needed to take the exam. And so by the end of the exam, my head hurt so much. Mid-exam to the end, my head hurt so much and I regret it so much. So if I could do the morning differently, I would have had a full meal before climbing and then another full meal a couple hours before my exam, so I could just have the fuel that I needed to take the exam. And if you are too nervous to eat before your exam, I highly recommend that you still try to force yourself to eat anyway, because honestly, you're gonna need it, and the last thing that you want is your head or your stomach to distract you while you're taking the exam. If anything, bring a snack with you to the exam because you can do that. I'll go more into that in a little bit. So actually going to the testing site itself, I ended up leaving an hour ahead of time because I didn't want to deal with the stress of any potential complications of getting to the testing site. Got there 45 minutes ahead of time, went into the testing site, checked in, and during check-in they give you this small packet to read. It's like 3 pages long, basically saying that you agree to not talk about the content of the exam at all, and that you promise to abide by the test taking rules and not cheat and all that stuff, and that you approve to have your hand scanned, and that you also approve of being recorded on video and audio throughout the exam and all that stuff. And so they have you read that. Then you go and have your handprint scanned, and then you also have your picture taken. They also assign you a locker where you can put your water, snacks, and your phone, which they have you turn off and they put into a plastic bag that is sealed with like a one-time seal. And it says on the bag that only a testing site worker can reopen the bag after your exam, and that any form of tampering with the bag will essentially nullify your exam. But then you put all your stuff in your locker, and then all you have with you to go to the actual exam room is your locker key and your ID. So what I didn't realize is that from the moment you get to the actual testing room, you are basically ready to take your exam at any point. Even if you're there like 30-40 minutes before your appointment time, if you show up then and you're checked in, the moment you get to the room, they're gonna have you take your exam. Go to the bathroom, drink water, have a snack if you need to, do all those things before you physically walk up to the testing room. When you are ready to walk up to the testing room, they have you pat yourself down to kind of show that you don't have anything on your body. They also scan your handprint to just make sure that you are yourself. The way that the testing room itself is set up is there are a bunch of little cubicles just like around the sides of the room. Each person has their own cubicle, and there are also noise canceling headphones at each station that you can put on if you don't want to hear any of the other test takers. Obviously, you're not allowed to talk at all during the exam, and then if you ever need anything to go to the bathroom or to ask a question, you just raise your hand silently until the proctor comes out into the room and talks to you at your little cubicle. For scratch paper, they give you a laminated piece of graph paper and they give you a permanent marker. So anything that you write on that laminated piece of paper is not erasable, so obviously don't do anything shady. And then there is a calculator programmed into the tests, similar to UWorld. And yeah, I think that's about as much as you need to know about the setting itself. For breaks, your first optional break is at 2 hours, and your second optional break, I don't remember because I never got to it, but it's like 4 hours or something like that. And the break really is optional. So while you're taking the test, the screen will go black. There will be a window that says, do you want to take your optional break? yes or no, and then you can just click yes, and then the proctor will come and escort you out, or you can click no, and then the test will continue. And like I said, if you ever need a break at any other point for any reason besides the optional breaks, just raise your hand, the proctor will come and escort you out of the room. Also, for any breaks that you ever take, your test time will be running the entire time. So I don't remember if they have a maximum amount of time that you can take your break for, but obviously you want to keep it kind of short because your test time is running. When your exam is done, the proctor will come into the room, they will check you out, you go to your locker, get your stuff, the worker who checked you in will cut the bag holding your phone, and then you will be a free human. A free, probably stressed out human. So the NCLEX is really, really good at playing mind games and making you feel really insecure, at least for me. And because I had done 83% of the UWorld question bank and I heard from people that UWorld is very similar to the NCLEX, I was expecting to see a lot of the same information and a lot of the same material, and I kind of wasn't seeing the same material, and it was freaking me out, and I was kind of thinking to myself, like, did I forget literally everything that I studied and everything that I saw in UWorld? Did it just slip out of my brain and melt into a puddle on the floor because I am not recognizing any of the stuff that I am seeing? And because I had done so many UWorld questions, I was very accustomed to the kind of the cues that you would see in the answer choices. Like, you would start to see patterns and you kind of recognize, like, okay, this is the type of answer that you should be looking for. And that just didn't happen on the NCLEX. So yeah, I felt like I was shooting from the hip in the dark with a blindfold on with my left hand. It was not fun. Every time I got a select all that apply question, I was super happy because I know that those questions are supposed to be harder and it means you're doing better. And then every time it went back to a multiple choice question, I was like, dang, I got that question wrong. And it got to a point where I was just literally going back and forth between select all that apply, multiple choice, select all that apply, multiple choice. And so my emotions were just like, you know? And every question after question 75 just was like a dagger in the heart and just kept getting pushed further and further and further in every time I realized, like, the test hasn't shut off yet. I'm not doing well. And 115 is kind of a weird place for the test to shut off because the current max in 2022 is 145 questions. So it stopped at 115 and I was like, okay, it's kind of good that I didn't go to the max, right? Because that means I didn't need to like use all of the questions to show that I know the material on the exam. But at the same time, I was like, 115 might be enough for them to know like I have failed beyond any form of coming back. So yeah, that was pretty freaky also. I was just regretting everything that I ever did to prepare. Like, I was just like, I didn't study enough, I didn't use enough resources, I shouldn't have had a light day the day before my exam, I should have studied more the morning of my exam. I was just regretting every decision I had ever made. And now that I look back on it, I still very strongly stand by the opinion that you should have a very light study day the day before your exam, and you shouldn't study right before your exam. But just know that you're gonna get to a headspace where you will probably regret everything and question everything and doubt yourself. I don't know, that was just me personally, but it was rough. It was very rough. If you are at a point where you kind of feel like you're broken and sad and doubting everything you've ever done, just know that you're not alone, because I was definitely there also. And take your break. I didn't take my break, but take your break if you need to. Take a breather. Yeah. I also wanted to very quickly go over the Pearson Vue trick because it is something that I use. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's basically kind of a hack to try to see how you did on the NCLEX before actually knowing the official results. How it works is basically you go on the Pearson website where you register for the NCLEX and you try to re-register. And when you try to re-register, you put in all your information, payment information, but put in a card that is either not working or use an expiration date that is not correct for that card. And basically, if you try to do a new registration, if you get a pop-up that says, our records indicate that you have recently scheduled this exam, another registration cannot be made at this time, that means that you passed the NCLEX unofficially. And that is because it won't let you re-register for a new NCLEX date because you've already passed the first time. According to this random guy on the internet who compiled data based on a bunch of people who did this trick and then followed up saying if it was accurate or not, for the people who got this good pop-up, it was accurate 99.52% of the time. So basically, if you get this pop-up, you're good as gold, according to this guy. And I will link his video down below so you can deep dive into that and decide for yourself if you want to do it or not. I did the Pearson Vue trick. I got the good pop-up. I found out 2 days later that it was accurate and I passed. There is a small chance that you will get the bad pop-up and it'll be wrong and that'll freak you out. But again, you can deep dive into his video and decide for yourself if it's something that you want to do. So like I said, very simple, just go on the Pearson Vue website, try to re-register for the NCLEX. If it doesn't let you re-register and you get that message, then you probably passed. Yeah. Another thing that I did that my best friend told me that she did when she took the NCLEX is that all of her classmates checked the Breeze website for your license. I ended up doing this at 5:30 in the morning, 2 days after I took the NCLEX, and it is so funny because Jess also did it at the same exact time as me, and we both texted each other the screenshot of my license to each other at the same exact time, in the same exact minute, because we both checked it at the same time. And that was a way that I saw that I got my license hours before the BRN emailed me saying, this is your license. So yeah, if you're willing to check that a bunch of times as well, that's another way that you can see your license before you get the official results. And now for some final words of encouragement if you are about to take your NCLEX. Just know that you'll probably never get to a point where you feel super duper 100% ready, but just know that you got this and you did as much prep as you could and you're ready. Trust your UWorld statistics. If they're telling you that you're highly likely to pass, it is because you are. Be present with every single question that you answer. If you feel really insecure about how you answer a question, just as soon as it's done, move on and be present 100% with the next question, and just know that you know what you're doing. Trust your gut, don't change your answers, and yeah, just have confidence in yourself. You got this, and you're gonna pass. Thank you so much for watching. That is all I have to say. If you have any other questions that I haven't addressed, please leave them down in the comments below. And if this video helped you have a success story, please let me know that as well, because that would make me super happy. Wish you all the best, but you got this. Good luck. Bye. Oh my gosh, this camera is so hot now. But look at this view though. Isn't that so pretty? That's what I was looking at while I was recording.